Today I want to talk about some tips and tricks for general survivability in challenging endgame content in Destiny 2. This is because next week on Tuesday, May the 6th, the new Rite of the Nine activity is launching, which is kind of refreshing some older dungeons, giving us an explorer mode, which is kind of like a story mode, as well as a much more difficult ultimatum mode, which is pretty much like a contest mode, which these three dungeons never had when they first launched. And something that makes this ultimatum mode different from the contest modes that we've seen with Vesper's Host and Sundered Doctrine is that this time they're activating the Notswap modifier, which is normally found in Trials of Osiris and the competitive PvP playlist. Notswap means that if you change your exotic armor piece or the ammo type of weapons in the kinetic or energy slot, you'll lose all your ability cooldowns. Now, we have been in a bit of a loadout swapping meta ever since we got access to the loadout tab in Lightfall. So for PvE, you can have a completely different loadout for running around doing mechanics and then swap to one to make it more efficient for boss damage. And to take it to extremes, some damage setups actually have you swapping loadouts in the middle of damage phase. For example, Warlock's putting down a Well of Radiance and then swapping to a Sanguine Alchemy loadout. And it seems like Bungie's not a fan of this, which is why they've introduced the Notswap into Rite of the Nine. Now, this video is not going to be recommending a complete Notswap loadout for each class to use in Rite of the Nine. I do want to make a video like that, but once I've seen what the changes are and I see what's most effective in the activity itself. Because really the choice is going to come down to whether you prioritize survivability or ammo generation or single target damage with Celestial or Cuirass or Star Eaters. And those decisions will depend on what each encounter actually requires once we see it live. So instead, what I want to do with this video is show some individual build crafting elements that can be worked into any build which do not require exotic armor, exotic weapons, or any swaps. First up, something really simple, and you probably already have it equipped if you're running a Prismatic subclass, and that's the Facet of Purpose fragment. This is one of the best fragments because its effects are very powerful. Pick up an orb and it gives you an effect that matches the element of your equipped super. Now, being on a solar super for restoration is obviously very strong and very common, but I specifically want to talk about being on a void super for the Overshield, because there are some hidden benefits to that I don't see people talking about very often. The only fragment I have equipped for this example is Purpose, and I don't have any other mods except a Kinetic Siphon to make an orb in the first place. So I'll spawn an orb, and when I pick it up, it'll give me a 50% overshield for 5 seconds. And obviously I can take damage and it'll protect the health bar underneath the overshield until it runs out, and then I take damage to my health bar as normal. Now, I will come back to my point about overshield in just a second, but first, recuperation. Replenishes health each time you pick up an orb of power. I've taken Facet of Purpose off for this test, so I'm just going to make a new orb, take some damage, and then show you how much healing that is. Not bad. And a lot of players such as myself will default to having recuperation on pretty much all of their builds. You're spawning orbs all the time, you're picking them up all the time, so getting that constant healing from them every time you do just helps keep you alive in challenging endgame content without really thinking about it. But there is another mod that we could use instead of recuperation that a lot of players deliberately choose not to. Better Already. Your health begins to regenerate immediately after picking up an orb of power. Now, what's good about Better Already is that it can heal you up to full health. But what's bad about it, and the reason that a lot of players don't use it in PvE, is because the healing gets interrupted by taking damage, just like the passive healing you get from the recovery stat. So there, it stopped healing me already. But that's where the Overshield can really shine. If we combine Better Already with Facet of Purpose, with the two of them together, if we get weak, spawn an orb, pick it up and continue to take damage, you see we're still healing in the background underneath the Overshield, so we can get to full health, whereas if we were on recuperation, we'd only get a small chunk of health and we'd have to rely on other healing effects or passive recovery healing for the rest. So if you find yourself on Prismatic with a Void Super in Rite of the Nine, which you might well do because Tether, Twilight Arsenal and Nova Bomb are all very strong, definitely consider combining Facet of Purpose with Better Already instead of recuperation for a much more effective healing on orb pickup. But it doesn't just have to be about Facet of Purpose on Prismatic with a Void Super. There are many ways to get overshields in Destiny 2 these days, and they can help with passive healing on subclasses of any element. The boost for the Maligned Harvest artifact perk gives you a small void overshield every time you apply Weaken, which you can do with an ability that applies Weaken, or even a weapon perk like Withering Gaze. Now, bonus fun fact, I was just about to say Withering Gaze or Demoralize, precision final blows cause nearby targets to become weakened, but I just went to record an example of that, and it seems like it doesn't work. See, I just applied the weaken to that enemy there, and I have no Overshield. So Demoralize doesn't seem to proc the boost function of Maligned Harvest. So good to know. Withering Gaze, you just have to ADS for 1.5 seconds, and then apply the weaken, and you see I've got the Overshield. And a perk like Repulsor Brace grants a Void Overshield every time you defeat a Void debuffed enemy. So because Overshields can be really helpful in protecting the underlying health bar, meaning that damage instances to the Overshield don't interrupt passive healing, they're very effective on low recovery builds, like the majority of Hunter builds and some Titan builds. So if you find yourself running one of these builds, it's definitely worth considering whether you can fit a Void Overshield from somewhere into your setup. My next tip is about an additional source of passive healing that you can take advantage of. And I love it so much I always try to put it into my builds now if I can make it work. It's the Chaos Reshaped perk from the Salvation's Edge weapons. Being in combat for 12 seconds gives you Chaos Reshaped ×1 for a 20% damage boost. And if you remain in combat for an additional 12 seconds, you hit Chaos Reshaped ×2. And then every 7 seconds after that, you just get a free little pulse of healing. It's half as effective as recuperation, but as you see there, it can keep you alive even under heavy fire. And what I love about this perk is it's basically passively active. Even if the weapon is stowed, even if you never fire a bullet from it, as long as you have it equipped on your character, once you've been in combat for long enough, you're just gonna get that passive chunk healing every 7 seconds. I finally recently completed my solo Flawless Vespers host on Hunter, and I made sure that for the Puppeteer boss, I always had a Chaos Reshaped weapon on my character for that reason, and it definitely saved some runs for me. The only option in the heavy slot is the sword, which realistically you're probably not going to use, but in the kinetic and energy slots, there's lots of viable options. In the kinetic slot, you have the Strand SMG for a primary option, or the Stasis Sniper for a special, and in the energy slot, you have the Arc Bow and the Solar Pulse as primary options, and the Void Glaive as a special. But what's interesting about Chaos Reshaped is that although it launched with Salvation's Edge and currently is exclusive to those weapons, LightGG is showing that potentially it's going to be dropping from some of the new Rite of the Nine reprised weapons. Wielder Flight and Long Arm are listed here, which are Spire of the Watcher weapons. Now this may be because some players got early access to Rite of the Nine before it was fully finished and got some drops, so maybe that's why they're in the API, because LightGG is reading them as existing out in the wild, and Bungie has commented that some perk combinations on those early weapons were incorrect and would be updated. So we'll have to see next week when the activity actually launches what the real perk pools are on those weapons, but it would be amazing if Chaos Reshaped is on some of them to give us more options to fit that into our builds. And that's all I really wanted to cover in this video. If you have your own ideas for things that can improve general survivability in Destiny 2's endgame that are not dependent on loadout swaps or exotic armor, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe because it does really help my channel. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.